All right, we're here today with Anton Barbeau. How you doing, man?
I am all right, and it's great to see you again.
You too.
Yeah.
Last time we were talking about Man Bird, which I wanted to touch on before we get into the new record, because it's kind of been almost a year now that it's been out, and it
Yeah.
seems to have like an extended life, which kind of seems appropriate for the weird pandemic time.
Yeah. And Manbird is a double album, so I guess it gets extra time on Earth to be extra attention. So
Yes. And you released the Across the Drama Pond video rather late in the day, but that's cool video.
yeah,
Definitely like brought that song to my attention, whereas I was listening to other ones more on the album.
yeah, yeah. It was I sort of love doing the videos. It's so fun, and we always have these ideas for the next one, but it takes a lot of effort. I mean, these are just me and Julia generally making these videos. We'd originally planned that the Drama Pond video was going to have a cast of thousands. This is all pre-pandemic, and we started blocking it out, and we wanted to do it in sort of the style of Top of the Pops, some sort of British pop show with an audience and a host and a band looking really bored and blah blah blah. And pandemic came along, and of course that means no cast of thousands, no audience, except we turned ourselves into the audience. We were the dancers and we were the band and all that stuff. But it does take a lot of energy, a lot of effort every time I want to do one of these things. Even if we think we're streamlining, every single time we think, okay, this time we know what we're doing. We're going to nail this, let's block it all out, and here we go. And then it unfolds, it unravels. I get moody, the moody artiste who, shoot it again. I look terrible, So it takes longer than we expect. But also, and we're actually planning one more video for that album, even though I've moved on to the next record. We want to do one more, and this one will be a simple one. But Drama Pond is a great fun video to make, and I am glad that it's kind of helped give that album a second boost, because the Manbird record is one of the most, I guess, significant records I've made, partly because it's all about me. It's an autobiographical record. It's telling my story, and that's how I was really into it when I was making it. I was very present. There aren't songs on that record that are just kind of thrown together and that'll do. Everything was very meaningful, and so doing the videos is definitely a way of keeping energy for that record out there. So
cool. Is the next song going to be a secret, or?
No. We want to do a video for Underneath the Mushroom Tree.
Oh,
and it's, in such contrast to the other videos that we've done for the record, we want to do something really simple. Genuinely simple. I'm not just saying that, but probably standing under a tree, stoned, wearing a caftan, and it's a 2-minute song, so we'll be done quick. Yeah, maybe we'll hire some crows. But the idea of just doing something very natural, something that doesn't involve the green screen and all the trickery. We would like to do something out in the garden, just go film under a tree and do something sweet and lovely and simple, because that's the kind of song that is. It's I think the other songs on the record have your full production. Across the Drama Pond, it's got horns, and it's got cellos, and it's got all kinds of stuff on it, whereas Underneath the Mushroom Tree is a sort of a harmonium and a vocal, and I think that's it. So it lends itself to something simple and natural. So
you mentioned Top of the Pops. Tell me about your relationship to that show, being from the West Coast.
Well, I certainly didn't know it growing up. It's more just something that's always referenced, right? For those who are Anglophiles, I guess.
Yep.
And then I did live in England for a number of years, and it's not like it was on the air at the time. But of course, it's easy to go back and research all this stuff. It's part of kind of collective pop consciousness anyway, I think, for those of us who are music fiends.
Yeah.
And so I think for me, it's just the image of the kind of, I don't know if it's the obligatory performance from a band. You know, they actually want to be there? Half of the bands look like they just can't believe they have to do this, and the other half of the bands look like, we can't believe we're trying so hard to do this thing that looks completely fake. So I think there's a real charm to it, a real charge to it. That's because it's sort of in this hinterland between, you know, a genuine performance and a lip sync, you know, and with you get the crowd of people who, you know, are either genuinely happy to be there or genuinely bored, you know, and so forth. But it's still of a time when we could say maybe things are a bit more innocent, because the people in the audience, you know, in the crowd, the dancers, when the camera is on them, they're not spending their days doing selfies. So they don't have a selfie face. They just look kind of blank at the camera, like, oh, you know, and there's something really charming about that, I think, you know, that a kind of innocence. You know, everyone's trying to be cool, you know, as they're dancing to Kajagoogoo or whatever. But you know, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it was very much a part of British culture, which I remember like when I first heard about it in like the late 80s, I guess, when I was growing up. We didn't really have anything like that here.
Yeah.
Like I guess Saturday Night Live would be sort of comparable, but it wasn't, you know, you had to stay up late to watch that, and
Yeah.
like, and it was 2 live songs. It wasn't like everyone's so focused on the charts and whatnot.
Right.
Though I've looked now that, you know, we can go back and find all this stuff on YouTube. Have you ever seen when Public Image Limited was on American Bandstand?
Yeah, that's a great one.
That's so nuts.
Yeah. There's so many moments like that from that era, right? So many, you know, all the whatever the, you know, talk show or late night show or whatever, all the shows of the moment, you know, suddenly had to invite these cutting edge new wave punk rock artists on board, and most of them just had no clue. I mean, I saw Adam and the Ants on the Tomorrow Show with Tom Snyder, you know, and I mean, it changed my life, and he seemed fine with it, you know. But man, you know, I mean, Gary Newman on Saturday Night Live, Gary Newman, the B-52s, and the Specials. I don't know if they were in consecutive weeks, but in my mind, you know, it was like a 1-2-3 punch that changed my life. And then Adam and the Ants. So seeing all these bands on television, especially seeing them performing live when you know, as a teenager, suddenly you realize there's something brand new happening that you know goes against, as at least it seemed in the moment, goes against everything you've ever experienced. And it was it was so thrilling. I mean, some of that stuff is also referenced, especially on the song Across the Drama Pond that we were just talking about. It's like, it's me looking back on those teenage days when, you know, just blown away. I remember coming home from Tower Records with my first Gary Newman LP, and I was so scared to tell my dad, look, I got this, but don't worry, it's new wave, it's not punk. And he didn't even know what I was talking about anyway. He wasn't judgmental. My dad was a cool guy. He's like, okay, don't worry, it's not punk rock. Okay, you know, it was just so funny because I knew that something was shaking me to the core, but you know, to other people, it's just a lot of music, you know, probably.
Yeah, I remember when I discovered the Sex Pistols, like for some reason, like my mother I had a mail order the shirt of Nevermind the Bollocks, but then like when I wanted to wear it to school, she was like, no, and like completely understandable, but like I threw a fit because, you know, I was a 13-year-old punk rocker who wanted to make my statement.
Yeah, I've got a friend, a childhood friend, this guy Eric, and still in touch with him, which is really nice. You know, it's one of those things when you go through your whole life, and we're not really close, but one of those people that you just, you know, you're in touch with from time to time to time over decades, right, over your entire life. And he was the guy. He was a year older, I think. And so, you know, when you're a kid, that's huge, right?
Yeah.
That's another world. And he lived around the corner, and we went to the same high school, Christian Brothers High School in Sacramento, represent. And my dad would always, you know, give us a ride in the morning to school, and Eric would come over, and I remember him getting in the car and talking about having watched Christiana F., you know, the German film.
Wow.
And he's sitting there in the backseat of the car talking about this, oh yeah, she becomes a hooker and she's taking heroin. Oh, but Bowie's in there. And I'm just thinking, I'm so, again, totally embarrassed in front of my dad. Don't say prostitute. Don't talk about drugs. Tell me more about David Bowie, So it's just those funny times of the awkward thrill of it all,
Yeah.
But again, my dad, it's so funny because my dad just, he either it went over his head, he wasn't even paying attention, or by now I know he takes everything in stride. Nothing, I mean, especially since the pandemic, I'm visiting him a lot. I'm up in Auburn, he's in Sacramento. It's a 40-minute drive, so see him about once a week, and he's telling all kinds of stories all the time. And they're there's prostitutes and drugs. There's never any David Bowie, but you know what I mean. It's like I don't know where my repressed childhood issues come from, because apparently they're not from him. Not just they're self-generated.
So the new record,
Yes.
Oh, the Joys We Live For.
Yes.
Tell me about the album title.
Well, the title came from the title track, which was written first. And let's see if I can do this succinctly. I was working on another record called Christian Wife, which was meant to be the follow-up to Manbird. I felt like, well, I've got to do concept albums for the rest of my life. That's just how it's going to be. And so I was trying to do this thing called Christian Wife that was going to, it's about a very domestic scene, a man and his wife, traditional conservative in a small American town, but they each have this secret life that the other doesn't know about. And the idea was that the secret life, of course, is going to be quite dark somehow. And I wrote a few songs. I was trying to make this work, and I just couldn't sustain it. I didn't really get very far. I love the idea. I still do, but I just couldn't get it anywhere other than a couple tracks. And meanwhile, I think it was New Year's Day, 2019, I think. I found a list of sort of the 50 weird folk records that you must listen to. And I decided it's New Year's, going to listen to a record that's new to me every single day, for the rest of the year or whatever. And I did manage to listen to most of the 50 records. So it was this very thrilling time, again, of discovery of a massive amount of music that I didn't previously know about. I mean, some of the stuff on the list, of course, I knew about, Incredible String Band or whatever. But yeah, there were a lot of things I'd never heard of, obscure folk things from Germany or Spain. Anyway, so inspired by that, I just picked up the acoustic guitar and sat there writing, Oh, the Joys We Live For. And it's meant to be an accounting of, kind of just, here I am on this farm, a very sweet scene with Julia, my now wife, Julia, and her family lives across the way. And we've got our animals, and it's just kind of looking around and assessing the simple and sweet things of life. And I kind of describe the album as a whole as, if Manbird was this epic, adventure story or whatever, then Oh, the Joys We Live For, it's just the stuff you find in your pockets. Nice. Right now I've got my phone in one pocket. I've got a crystal. I've got some keys. I've got a 50-cent piece, from Europe. In the other pocket, I've got my wallet. In my back pocket, I've got my mask. In my other back pocket, I've got my little notepad, the stuff, and I've got some guitar picks and so forth. This just, and that's what this record is. And I think that's what the title, Oh, the Joys We Live For, is kind of meant to sum that up. Just the little things that we can, that we can appreciate. You look around the room and think, oh, that's a nice window. I love this window. What a great window. I appreciate this window. And,
well, that's especially useful for a year like last year when, we were all stuck inside and you kind of had to appreciate those things or else you'd go crazy.
But I have to get this out of the way because I feel so guilty. I keep claiming it's because I lived in Germany for so long. It's this kind of honesty. I have to be, blunt about things. But Oh, the Joys We Live For, despite being presented with the narrative that it's my lockdown record. It's just, here I am on this farm for a year. and I'm just appreciating the little things in life. All but one song on this record came well before the pandemic.
Oh,
Um,
all right.
yeah, nobody knows this, and so here I am being German about it and breaking breaking the hearts of listeners around the universe. But
Well, I
yeah,
assume you were writing lots last year
yeah,
as well, so
I
you
do
probably have
have, I
more
have my,
albums.
I have my pandemic record all
Oh,
finished, you know,
excellent.
but but it's funny because this "Oh, the Joys We Live For," it really does. When I saw the press release, the label had written for the record with that narrative, the pandemic, the lockdown, the small domestic world. It makes perfect sense, and it's really lovely, and I believe in it. I can listen to the album and think, oh yes, of course, this is the record that he made, during the lockdown, living on a farm. But the
It's
truth
just
is,
not true.
it's just not true. Half the songs are written in Berlin, written and recorded in Berlin, and the other half are written here. Some of the songs are very much about domestic bliss. What's the one called? When life brings you beer, gives you beer, something like that. I don't actually drink beer, but I know people here who make beer. And I like the taste of beer. Like I said, I'm a non-drinker, but I do taste beer. I like the taste of beer. So it's just a simple thing. Try this. Oh, that's nice. Have some pear cider. Oh, that's nice. So there are a lot of moments on this record that are reflective of a very simple and sweet life that I have here on this farm with Julia and her family. But you other songs. There's one called 3 Days the Death Enigma. There's another one called Die Smiling. There's there. I keep telling people there are a lot of drugs and guns, and there's death, and you know broken bottles and fist fights. There's a lot of blood stains. There's a lot of stuff on this record that ain't filed under domestic bliss.
Yeah, I got the impression from the Death Enigma one. It's pretty
Yeah,
dark.
yeah. So it's funny though, because the reviews so far, people have gotten a few things really weirdly wrong. Two reviewers described "It's All Right, Rosie," the song "It's All Right, Rosie," as some sort of like seething with repressed anger. I'm looking at that, thinking, what? This is about my cat. You know, it's a very sweet song about this sensitive cat that we have that we're very patient with. We adore this thing, and we've got to be. It's like, how did people come away with that? That's a weird one to me.
Yeah, and that one, the lyrics are really just kind of observational. It
Yeah,
seems for that one, though. It does. I was going to ask you right before the middle eight. You bit by bit and step by step will open that third eye. Seem to take it into like a whole nother territory.
well, isn't that what we're all trying to do? We're trying to open the big third eye, aren't we? Hopefully, you know. So, I mean, not it's not like we're dosing our cat or anything. you know? Don't get me wrong, but yeah, it's been a funny. Oh, I hate the word, but journey, with this cat, because when we got her, she was a rescue cat, and she'd been traumatized apparently by another cat that she lived with, and so she's very flinchy, and if you went anywhere near her face, she would lash out. So I used to get a scratch on my hand every week, um, and so over time, just learn to just kind of learn how to work with this cat. What does she need? What's too much for her? So bit by bit, yeah, as the song says, she's she's just so loving now. She's affectionate and friendly. She loves the dog. I think getting the dog just changed our cat Rosie. She's just, you know, um, yeah. So she's really, it's kind of I'd say it's sort of a miracle, I guess. But she's generally turned into a very normal cat. Can pet her in the face and she's happy about it, and she loves that. So, anyway,
A bunch of questions popped into my head during your initial descriptions. I'm going to try and remember them. You mentioned that you recorded a bunch on this record in Berlin. I know you've lived all over the place. Do you have other albums that were recorded so disparately that would be like this, or do you usually record all in one
I would
Very
say, I would say most of my records in the last years, and I make a lot of records there. I mean, at least in the last 5 or 6 years, everything has been back and forth. Um,
okay.
Things are recorded in Berlin and then back here in California, because these are the places that I'm based. And then I'm also, well, if we take into account people sending me tracks, as as the same way that you're working, you have somebody email you some drum tracks or something, but um, I am also going over to England and doing recording there sometimes. And, so my records have been kind of cut and pasted from all over the place for years and years. It's only, I mean, I was going to say, I was thinking of 3 Minute Teas, my band in the UK with Andy and Morris from a while ago. But even those records, once I moved to Berlin, most of the work that I was doing finishing them was done in Berlin. So yeah, everything I do is kind of all over the place
So
generally.
this was kind of par for the course.
Yeah,
Making this record.
absolutely.
Okay. And the other thing I wanted to ask you, you mentioned trying to get through the list of the 50, what was it, obscure folk records?
Yes, like folk or weird folk or whatever the frame
Any
was.
standout discoveries?
Yeah, picked up the Comus record, and that's a freaky thing. That's a freaky little thing.
I've
eh,
never heard it.
it's not it ain't a peaceful record. It's not. It's actually one thing that I don't like to listen to very often because it's so unsettled or
Oh,
unsettling. But also on the other hand, picked up was it the Christ Tree by the band Trees, and they were this sort of culty Christian group. Um, it's a really beautiful record, and it's so genuinely inspired. This is so clearly their calling, and I think by now I'm no longer concerned with if someone's trying to shove their trip down your throat, religious or otherwise. That's pretty, that can be offensive. But when someone is just so inspired by whatever it is that they are inspired by, and they just have to reflect that inspiration in their work, I have a lot of love for that. And so it's, I don't, the Christian element of this record is that's fine. That's what got them going. But I thought the other day, oh, I wonder if my dad would like this one for Christmas, because maybe, the Christian element might actually appeal more to him since he is a, practicing Christian. But it's a beautiful record, and it's a really weird and inspired album.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like we were talking about, all the stuff you discover when you were a teenager, and this whole world of pop music just being so exciting.
Mm.
I mean, it's not like it's like every day like it was back then, but it is still so nice that like these days there's still stuff to discover, like
Oh yeah.
bands you never heard that was just a whole discography to
Yeah.
sit back and enjoy and get through.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I when we last spoke, was I going on about ABBA and Fleetwood Mac? Probably.
Yes, I think you are.
Right, because during the time that I was making the Manbird album, those two bands were life-changing discoveries for me. And these are bands that I'd grown up just hating, and there's so much music that I grew up hating just as much as there was music that I loved, that's what it's like, especially when you're a teenager. If you're a music fan and you turn into a teenager, your passion for the things you love and your passion for the things you hate is so strong, right? It's so vital to define yourself sometimes by the things that you despise. That maybe that's changed. I don't know. I don't know what the kids these days. It may well be a different scene because with the internet, everything is fair game, and maybe there isn't the same kind of judgment. I don't know, but for me, discovering that I can love so much music that I did not like before is thrilling. So I've gone through so besides all that, whatever, getting into AC/DC or whatever, things like that. And then discovering Talk Talk, right? I mean, I remember them from their synthy pop hits, and I didn't know that they were going to be one of the most sort of profoundly beautiful uh, creators of music that I would come across. So, Talk Talk is a profound discovery, even though I'd known of them forever.
Mm.
So yeah, I think it's easy to keep finding stuff, whether it's obscure stuff that, say something like the Trees record, or bands that you have always known.
Or ABBA, the complete
Exactly,
opposite.
exactly.
Yeah.
How did I miss out on that? But it all served its purpose, I guess. I was meant to not know until it was time to know.
Yeah, that's funny when things happen like that. How did I miss this? Well, because now is the right time.
Yeah. So
Are you a Kevin Ayers fan?
yeah, yeah. Um, I'm not a expert. I have what's it called? It's the one with the painting. Da, 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 da. I have that one. I have the one with the painting. That's what I mean by not an expert. I mean, I've got one of his records, and I love it. And it's not Joy of a Toy, but and then I know his stuff with Soft Machine, and so I really do like him. I don't own enough of his music to say much about it.
I asked because I know you're a Anglophile, and particularly like the English eccentrics, of which
Yeah,
he was definitely one, but also because "Oh, the Joys We Live For" it took me a while to get right, as that was your title, because of there's I kept thinking it was "Oh, the Joys We Sing" because he had "Joy of a Toy" and "Whatever She
right.
Brings She Sings," and I was like,
Yeah, that's
all
the one
got
that I have.
mixed up.
I've got Whatever She Brings. Whatever we, that's the one I have. The tongue
Yeah,
twister.
okay.
Yeah, yeah. No, fair enough. Fair enough. I that may well have been in my brain. I wouldn't put it past me to, especially given that the "Oh, the Joys We Live For" title track is a very folky kind of thing. It fits a little bit of that vibe. But
Um, you mentioned the Christian Wife album, but there were other projects
yeah,
that sort of coalesced into this one. And last time we talked, we were talking about Power Pop, which I think had 3 exclamation points at that time. And
yes,
I was looking forward to that one because as we talked about then, it seems like it should be the greatest genre. And then when you listen to it, it doesn't quite have like the perfect pop sensibilities with the energy that I
yeah.
love separately. But I mean, I think I can pick out the ones that were going to be on your Power Pop album, and those are my favorites on the record. So,
But tell me which ones you think they are, and then I will
uh,
completely confuse our narrative further.
one of her superpowers,
Right?
I would,
Yes, yes.
yeah, that was definitely my favorite on the record.
Okay.
Um, Cowbell Camembert, possibly.
No, that was going to be on the Falco years. That's the one official pandemic song on this record. Official pandemic only meaning that written during lockdown. It was going to be my pandemic party album, the Falco years.
The Falco Years is a brilliant title.
you
Tell
know,
me
it
more
was,
about that.
well, when I first got back here, I flew out of Berlin, grabbing what we didn't know if it was going to be the last flight I could get with COVID suddenly kicking off everywhere, right?
Yeah.
So I got out of Berlin pretty quick, and so I'm here on the farm with Julia, and jet lagged and having dinner.
Oh, you froze.
Okay.
Okay.
Where was we? Yeah. So at dinner, we're listening to the Falco, one of a Falco LP that I had, and I found it really inspiring. I just love the vibe of that record, and I wanted to make a record that felt like that. I felt like it was something I could do on my own. I got a drum machine, I've got a few guitars and some synths. I could do something that felt like that album, and so Cowbell Camembert was one of the efforts in that direction. But again, like Christian Wife and um, all these little projects, just they didn't last long, or the inspiration kind of petered out after a song or two.
Okay. Well, I wanted to talk about one of her superpowers being my favorite song off the record. the last line I initially misheard as the princess trapped in her tower. It's befuddling the power pop men, right?
Yes.
I thought it was befuddling the power pop plan. I was like, oh, that's a
Yeah.
nice subtle reference in there. Befuddling, though, a good word you don't often hear in pop songs.
Well, there's a reason that I don't sell many records because I'm the guy who can fit the word befuddling into a pop song.
But tell me about that one.
Well, believe it or not, it wasn't actually intended for the Power Pop album. The Power Pop album, which is a finished product now, not released but finished. It's a separate thing, and it's the Power Pop album is very much not really power pop. There aren't any sort of jangly tunes on it. But anyway, the song "One of Her Superpowers" was written during a period when I wanted to. I thought I was going to make some sort of I can't believe it's power pop, or I can't believe it's not power pop, or I can't believe how much I hate power pop as a genre kind of EP. I wanted to just gather a bunch of really catchy, jangly songs that were also confusing and offensive. And I won't tell you on camera what one of her superpowers was originally called, but I'll send you an MP3 as long as you promise, etc.
Okay, I promise.
Yeah. So I was trying to write a series of very offensive and yet very irresistibly catchy pop songs and put them together. But it was actually, Julia was just cringing. Every day I'd have a new idea. And she'd, oh, please, no, don't. So the other one, what's that?
Yeah, I was going to say, I've been thinking about you.
Yes.
Very, very catchy, but then you repeat the word gobbledygook a bunch of times.
Yeah. And I'm actually starting to worry that because another, the record's just come out, seeing a handful of reviews come in, and they're lovely reviews. I don't mean to seem unappreciative. They're really sweet reviews, but it's really weird. Not only, I mentioned earlier, people getting the song about my dear cat completely wrong, but somebody described this one that I've been thinking about you as just a song of love and tenderness. And I'm like, are you kidding me? It's there's the line, probably my favorite Anton line ever. I'm a teenage man in a minivan squeezing milk from an old cup of tea. That's not meant to be. That's not a complimentary line. That's it's I think my issue with power pop. I was thinking about this morning. Power pop as a style of music, as a flavor, I can get behind. I like 3-minute pop songs. I love melodies and I love jangly 12-string guitars. But as a style, as a as sort of a color in a paint box, I'm all for it. But as a genre, it's a very self-limiting, form of music, and I find it often to be, emotionally stunted. Every song is about some girl who, the girl who just, she won't give me the time of day because she's the girl that got away. It's pathetic stuff, and it's just perpetuated, and seemingly by people who insist on staying within the lines. And I as a musician, that's the most offensive thing. I want music that goes everywhere. I just remembered the other day, and this is almost unconnected, but it's not, because nothing is unconnected, right? I remember the other day that my uncle Don, who used to live with me and my dad years ago, I remember him coming home with some, musique concrète record and trying to turn me on to that. I'm like, what is this? This is weird. But I'm thinking now, I had an uncle who tried to turn me on to that. That's great. That's fantastic. And that's what I want out of life all the time. I do not want, and I don't make music that wants to fit into something. I want to be liked and accepted, and I want my records to sell billions, if not millions of copies. But, I can't make music stays in one place for probably more than one song at a time, so yeah, the whole power pop genre, and yet I'm so often affiliated with it. I'm part of the family, and that's fine. But I'm going to be the weird cousin who they don't want to invite, but they have to invite. You know,
Uh,
so
Speaking of early reviews, you got a comparison to Van Dyke Parks, which
yeah,
was super cool.
yeah, ain't that nice? That was, you know, I think, as somebody who puts out a lot of music and has always had ambition to do something big with it, right? I mean, um, you get to a point where, well, I'm not sure if the million selling single is going to come along. So on the other hand, when you get a little comparison like that, that's a big deal. That's lovely. That was just a
Yeah.
lovely little moment. I'm like, okay, this ain't power pop. That made me very happy. So thank you for mentioning that. That was a really cool little thing.
Yeah, totally. And along with this idea of like pushing the boundaries, like in it is one of her superpowers. You mentioned Satyricon and Breathless, by these two incredible, directors, Fellini and Godard, two of my favorites.
Yeah.
Um, I wanted to talk to you about films like that. First of all, do you consider your music? Do you think of it in a cinematic way?
I don't know that I do, because I'm fairly insecure, and I don't. It's hard for me to think on a grand scale. I think in a more, I'm more of a TV kind of guy than a cinema.
Like a 3-minute pop song versus like a
You
symphony.
know, yeah. I mean, even though I don't mean to contradict what I said a moment ago about always wanting to reach for everything, but my sense of scale and scope is it's probably lessened in recent years. I don't think as big as I did at a few points in my career. I was bolder, I felt, and could reach for bigger things. Nonetheless, I'm very influenced by. Oftentimes, I think it's texture and tone. And so somebody like Godard, with him, it's maybe partly it's the playfulness and the always breaking down that fourth wall, right? Um, in Weekend, one of the characters says something like to another character, "Excuse me, are you in the film or in reality?"
Oh
You
yeah.
know, and I don't know how old I was when I first saw that, but that blew my mind. And that's how I live. I'm always asking myself and other people, wait, are you in the film or are you in reality? What is this? And I want to do that with music. I want to be able to break things down a little bit and confuse people, as to where from which point they're listening to what I'm doing, because suddenly their chairs move. Now they're on stage. Now they're in the foyer while they're listening. I don't know if that makes any sense. It doesn't make any sense to me. So, but yeah, I mean, Tarkovsky, huge hero. But I think maybe when I was first getting into him, it's more likely to have a reference. Maybe it's pretentious. I know that there's a Bergman reference on my very first record. Winterlight. Throw it in there, and it's because it's meaningful to me. I don't know if it sounds, poncy to a listener at this point, but I don't know that my influence, the influence of these great directors, for example, I don't know how that translates into my actual music. It's just more of a mindset, the artistic mindset.
What are some of your favorite films?
Pause. Well, I mean, we just mentioned Tarkovsky and Stalker. It's just how can, I mean, that's a spiritual film for me. That's the search for God, isn't it? And I feel like you can find it in the film. um, and Monty Python and the Holy Grail. You know, the
Yeah.
Beatles Help. Um, but it's funny, I'm kind of going blank, even though I've got a thousand
Yeah.
favorite films. Just at the moment, I'm watching. Is it called The American Friend? Wim Wenders, which
Oh,
I've never seen before.
with Dennis Hopper.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Set in Hamburg.
All right. Yeah.
So I mean, well, we've just watched Guardians of the Galaxy 2 the other night. That's now on the list of favorite films.
Yeah.
And the Wicker Man. It's you can kind of tell that I go in a million directions, right? We watched Cocteau's Orpheus recently, and so just anywhere and everywhere. But that's probably a good enough list to give listeners a reason to yawn.
I should watch Weekending. It's been years, and I love that, especially when I first saw it. It blew me away. But then again, it isn't the type of film you can say you got to come over and watch this with me.
Right.
Like, there are just a few friends who would get it. Anyone else, like, just that hugely extended scene where it's just the traffic jam.
Yeah.
It's like 12 minutes or whatever. The little kids playing ball with the old man. I thought that was hilarious. And other people were just like watching, like, what? Why are we watching this? Why was this made? I'm like, no, there's something here.
Yeah, I forget how literal people generally are. And something like Weekend, there's a scene early in Weekend when I think she's in her therapist's office or something like that, and there's a dialogue, but the music starts to creep up, and it gets louder and louder, and it overtakes the dialogue, and things like that. Just thinking about those things blow my mind. And again, that's what I secretly wish to do in my pop songs, even though I also want to make those million selling records, right? I want to be the likable pop guy because I love that. I love that about music. I love things that are just that make people feel groovy, man, or whatever. But I also just want to screw with people or just play with the form. It doesn't have to be about messing with other people. Sometimes it's just what can I do that subverts my own work, in an artistically satisfying way, not just a career destroying way.
You mentioned about referencing Winter Light. Put me in mind. I interviewed Mikey Georgeson once from David Devant and his Spirit Wife, and I asked him about one of the lyrics, and like he just looked. I was like, "Why was it this?" And he was like, "Well, that's the lyric." It's just like as simple as that. Like, that's what this song is.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm never. I don't think I could be direct like that about anything. I don't have an answer that's ever not referencing 12 other things at any given time. I wish sometimes I really admire that. I admire people who just, there you go. There's the answer. But actually that reminds me of something else that,
no, I'm always on a tangent about things, which circling back to my initial point, the next song after the one where you list Satyricon and Breathless is actually called Filmic.
I mean, there's yeah. Sorry, we got a little glitchy there, so I don't know if.
Okay.
Oh well, there's actually nothing. There's nothing dramatic behind. There's no story for the title other than I had just started working with the audio program Logic. I've been a Pro Tools guy for years and years, and I got a new computer that came with Logic on it, and it was just messing around. And there's some really nice orchestral instruments that come packaged with it. So I was just, all my first days with Logic were these sort of orchestral sounding pieces because I was trying out all the internal instruments. And so that was just one of the little pieces. I've always liked it. There's nothing more to it. And it just sounds like it's a, sort of, it sounds filmic, it sounds like, so.
But it's cool with the gospel vocals. Reminded me a bit of like, like right before Britpop, like the early 90s, like Primal Scream, Screamadelica put me in mind of.
Well, the funny thing there, those were originally also part of like a sample pack that came with Logic. So it's these South African singers, and I just, and I wasn't sure. It was like, Julia said, that's still a bit cheesy, isn't it? So is it? Yeah, maybe. So I had Rosie Abbott, who sings on a couple songs on this record, and she sings on quite a bit of the Power Pop record coming out next year. But anyway, so this artist Rosie Abbott, who's just a wonderful songwriter, I said, could you redo all these parts, all these little, oh yeah, vocal bits. So she just sang on top of them, and she's cool because she can just do that. A week later, she sends you the whole thing. It's like, that was easy, thank you. So it gave it a bit more of an intentional feel, I guess. So.
And up next, I want to ask you crystals. You mentioned earlier you had a crystal in your pocket. What is it?
I think it's called. There we go.
Oh, that's a nice egg-shaped one.
Yeah, I think it's is it like smoky quartz? I don't really, just disclaimer right away. I don't know crystals. I'm not a crystals guy, but I like carrying this one around. I think it's called smoky quartz. Somebody can correct me perhaps, but yeah, Julie and I kind of. There's another one in the windowsill. Actually, crystals everywhere. Yeah, we kind of joked that we were going to get into crystals. That kind of like, hey, let's get into something. Let's get into crystals. Yeah, and it also coincided with this fantasy that we were going to go on a crime spree, and so the song itself is kind of meant to secretly document this alleged crime spree that we never actually went on, where we just decided that stealing crystals would be pretty easy. But then we started talking about that, like, if we actually did that, we would feel so rotten because we don't steal stuff. We would feel so rotten. And if you're stealing from a crystal shop, I mean, what bad vibe is that you're putting out to the world? And then, of course, we get caught. Of course, we'd get caught. We get caught stealing crystals, which is pathetic. And then Julia's mother would be so disappointed in me. Like, really? Really? So the whole thing just kind of imploded. But I got a nice song out of it. And we tried getting into crystals. We've probably spent, I would guess at this point, we've spent probably $12 or $13 on crystals over the last year. So we tried.
It's a big investment.
Yeah, we tried.
I really like the that fuzzed out guitar part on that song. It went really nicely with the synths.
Yeah, that's Brian Poole. He's a guy from the whole Elephant Six collective. He was Elf Power and of Montreal, I think, are some of the bands that he's known for playing with. And I met him. I had just gotten back to Berlin. I was supposed to play with the Bevis Frond at some medical convention, one of those things, right? And my gig got canceled. And it turns out on the same night, Robin Hitchcock was playing, 10 minutes from where I lived. So I went down to see Robin play, and Brian, who was also living in Berlin at the time, was playing with Robin. So I ended up meeting him after the gig, or got in touch with them somehow, and I said, hey man, I'm making this record, and do you want to play on something? And so originally he came and played on Space Force, which was on Manbird, and then some months later I said, hey, you want to do some more stuff? And so he came over and just recorded a handful of things for the Oh the Joys, what became the Oh the Joys We Live For record, including crystals. I'm glad you like that, because I think it's beautiful.
Yeah, it was really lovely.
Yeah, he's what a sweet guy, what a great guy to work with. Just a real pleasure, and he's very humble. It's like, hey man, if you want to use that, I don't know, maybe there's something there. And watching him play, it's like, that's really good. That's you're pretty good. You're pretty good, man. Yeah. So I'm glad you dig that, because I do too. I think it's pretty groovy.
And talking about working with people, there are also this band Salt,
Yeah.
Who there's a couple things on the record with them. I do not know them, so please tell me the story.
Well, actually, the things that are on the Oh the Joys We Live For record are demos that were meant for a second Salt record. So Salt is a band that it's a French band, essentially a French band formed in Paris. I met the main guy, Stefan, when we were recording at Abbey Road. It was part of a tribute to Scott Miller from Game Theory, Loud Family. We were all fans and friends of Scott's, and so several people were gathered together to help work on this record, this tribute record. And so that's how I met Stefan, and he had his guys from way back, bass player and drummer Fred and Benoit, and then Ken Stringfellow came in to produce the record, and is, I guess, part of the band as well. So we did the first Salt record partly at Abbey Road and partly at this fantastic place in Paris called Fairberg, where Serge Gainsbourg had worked and Nick Cave and all. It's like one of those. It's the place in Paris that you go if you're not in London. We're working at Abbey Road. Apparently, it was beautiful. It's a beautiful studio. Anyway, so we did the first record. My contribution was primarily as vocalist. I did kind of reworks a lot of Stefan's lyrics, because even though he speaks English, his English is very French. So I sort of had to translate his English into English. And the second record it's not out yet. And it was much more of a pandemic, sort of a victim of the pandemic. I think Stefan and gang had recorded some of the material already. And I was, it was meant to be a triple album, and it ended up being a single album, of course. But so yeah, the songs on my record were going to be demos, or they were demos that for possible inclusion on the Salt thing, but that didn't happen that way. And instead, Stefan would just send me backing tracks mostly, and I would write the lyrics and the melodies and just send him back vocals, and then he sent it off to Ken Stringfellow, who produced it and turned it to this whole other thing. So I'm a little less clear, honestly, on what the second Salt record even is, because when I finally heard it, I didn't know half the material. Either Ken Stringfellow was singing it, or the bassist Fred was singing, or there's another guy who Dominique, I don't remember his full name, but he died before the record was finished. I think he'd been ill anyway, and they kind of knew this would be his last moment. So I think there's 4 or 5 singers and songwriters on the record. And it's kind of an all over the place thing. So I don't know so much what to say about the second Salt record, and and because of the pandemic, it's like, am I still even in this band? Is it even a band? I don't really know. I think it's really Stefan's thing, more than anything. So,
well, the song Salt Lick on your record,
yes.
There's a good story in the press release about the bass line.
Oh.
If you could repeat that.
Yeah. That was a funny one. I mean, and again, this falls under the Anton's bad bedside manner heading, and again, with the irony being that bass player Fred in Salt is also a doctor. So he and Stefan are both doctors, and he's an amazing bass player. He's a really weird bass player, but he's an amazing bass player. And generally, I really love what he does. But part of what he does is always look for the outside edge or the weird angle, and he always makes it work. And when I say always, I don't mean always. I mean most of the time makes it work. And in the case of Salt Lake, I'd sent him my demo, and he sent me back something that I don't know what to say other than it was one of the most perplexing things I've ever heard. What is this? What is what? And maybe I'm used to hearing him playing in the context of Stefan's songs, or they have a long history, so they have a chemistry that maybe I don't share with him, or But the Salt Lick on my record, it's a really simple three chord song. It's a really basic piece of pop music, and so getting this just gnarly bass line from him, this baffling bass part was. I just said, would you? Could you consider maybe sending me something just a little bit more straightforward? And I sent, well, what you hear on my record is me playing bass. I grabbed my little Hofner, and that's just a one take performance. This is what I had in mind. Here's what I think of as a melodic bass part. Here we go. Da, 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 So I sent it back to him. Never heard another word. He's like, no, I have sent you my work. I've never heard another word from him on that one.
He doesn't do straight eighth notes.
He does not do straight any notes. It's fascinating. It's fascinating. And he said he's a character. I really have great admiration for his musicality and his attitude, except when it applies to my songs, apparently. Like, dude, come on. It's a funny one. And that's working with people, isn't it? Yeah, that's that thing. You talk about vision. He's got a vision of how he thinks music is meant to go. And yet we share so much of the similar background, the kind of pop music that Fred and the guys in Salt like. We all, it's pretty familiar stuff to all of us. So what he's doing is coming from another place altogether. However, even though he's not on bass on that song Salt Lick, the following song on the record is called Die Smiling, or maybe I don't know where it is on the record, somewhere on the record though. It's called Die Smiling, and that was written with Fred in mind, not the death part, but I felt I wanted to write something a little bit more musically ambitious. And so rather than writing it on guitar, I wrote it on piano or synth or something. So it's a keyboard song. I can do a little bit more musically on a keyboard than I can on a guitar. So I wanted to do something that would be more with him in mind. So here, play something weird. This is more a moment for you to do your freaky thing. And I think in that case, we never actually got around to him doing a bass after all. But he did play saxophone on that one. So that's cool, because he's a really cool sax player too. He's on the Power Pop record playing sax on a certain song, and his inspiration for his contribution to that was Black Star, the Bowie record.
Oh, wow.
And to me, it's like, okay, you got the job. And so so that's the thing. Is like, if I can relate to Fred, with over Black Star, right? I mean, so that's good enough. So yeah, he played sax on it. It's fantastic. But neither of the songs ended up on the actual Salt records. So there's a long story for you.
Is there anything we haven't covered about the record that you wanted to talk about? I think we hit all the songs.
Yeah, I think we've covered a lot of it, and I don't know. I can say I'm really pleased with how it came out, because it's a record that wasn't your record as far as I knew. The previous record, Manbird, was made with 100% inspiration and intention. And it's a double album. Manbird was this, for me, an epic adventure. And I knew that every single song had to be right for the record. And if it wasn't right, it didn't go on there. But still, I felt like I was on a real roll, and I knew my standards were high. With the Oh the Joys We Live For album, as we said, it's a record that came from multiple places, all these little ideas or intended albums that just never came to fruition. And and I'd even released Oh the Joys We Live For as a download only thing a year ago, on some I don't remember what I used, but it flopped. I think it was $1.83 worth of downloads. So in other words, nobody knew it existed. And it had a whole different set of songs on it. And so I retooled it and Bigster, the label out of Burbank, they said they'd be happy to release it. So I gave them what's this the final version, and it's turned into this really lovely very little success story. I say little again, kind of referring to the stuff in the pockets, right? Just the little things you find, the coins and the keys. It wasn't meant to be a grand album. It's not meant to be, Tarkovsky does Cocteau or something like that. It's just a little thing, and yet it turned out to be a lovely record. I mean, if I'm saying so, what I mean by that is I'm surprised by it. Like, wait, what songs are on it again? And go, yeah, this is really sweet. So yeah, I'm really happy with what it is. I didn't know I was making this record until it's a record that made itself. You know what I mean?
Was that a new experience for you, having like different projects that sort of coalesced into another thing completely?
No,
Okay.
to be honest. I mean, sometimes you just have songs laying around, or sometimes you record something for one album, but it doesn't quite fit. You end up using it later. So I've always been able to work, gathering scraps and, making a magpie's nest or something like that. It's actually more of a rare thing, as with Manbird or earlier albums, Splendid Tray and In the Village of the Apple Sun. It's a rare thing when an entire album is written as a piece. But in this case, the fact that it was with Oh the Joys We Live For, the fact that it's 4 or 5 different projects that all ended up in one place, that's curious, that's new. So but the actual power pop record that we've alluded to a couple of times, yeah. That's much more of an intentional thing again. That's and that is all songs written for that album. That's my pandemic album. That's what I did during the lockdown, and so
that'll be out next year.
Yeah.
All right, we'll talk again then about it. It was an incredible buildup over 2 previous podcasts to get to it.
So funny. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, you got anything coming up you want to plug or anything? You've been doing some online shows, right?
Yeah, that's been really fun. I avoided that for the sort of the first year of the pandemic. I'm not doing that, but we got kind of roped into something in January, and it was really fun. And I was nervous, like, oh my God, we're doing a real show, an audience. And so then Julie and I started doing them monthly. So we've done 5 or 6 by now. And I think we're going to do one more in the series, or in the season, more for the season. I think it's nice to frame it with something like season or series, isn't it? We'll do one more and then kind of call it for a while. And I think the next one will be an all piano set. So, and I don't know when it's going to be. It'll be on Facebook. That's where we've been hosting these. It'll be soon, within a few weeks, because it does look like I'm finally going back to Berlin for a little bit. And Julie's going to come over there as well for a bit. So it's a good excuse to kind of take a break from doing the live stream gigs. But yeah, I don't know what I have to plug. I don't have anything to plug, which is nice. Yeah.
Is Oh the Joys officially out now?
Yeah, as of yesterday. I didn't realize that until the label pointed that out. I said, it's coming out soon. They said, it's coming out today. I'm like, oh, hooray. That tells you how kind of laxed or relaxed I am about the record, an album that kind of made itself. But I want to give props again to Rex and Christina at the Big Stir label. I hope I felt like I slipped and said Big Star, but it's because we got Black
you said
Star.
Big Star.
Okay, good, because we've also got Black Star in there. But those guys, Rex and Christina, have been so sweet with this record. I mean, they've been great to work with already. I've done 2 other albums with them, including an Allison Seconds reissue, and but I've also had sort of kind of behind the scenes dealings with them as real people, and not just upbeat record label folks. They're just really good people, and not that I didn't know that, but when you have that kind of confirmation, when you're dealing with something a little bit, trickier, and you find out that these are the right people to work with, that's a cool thing. So I'm really glad about that. But also, they're just lovely about this record. They're enthusiastic in a way that I'm, that comes back to haunt me in a good way.
Yeah, I
So,
watched that the January show they had. The Corner Laughers were on as well, and they
right,
seemed just
right.
like really genuinely like into music.
Yeah. Oh
Yeah.
yeah. They really are. They've got a lot of enthusiasm. So
Cool.
yeah.
All right. Well, thanks very
Cool.
much for coming on the show. Oh, you want
Yeah.
to say?
No. I was going through like, do I have anything? No, but nothing. Yeah. Yes. Thank you. Thank you so much, Oliver. I'm just totally enjoyable.
Excellent.